Hey everybody, this is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com, and in this video we're going to learn how to make web components. Yay! Now what are web components? Web components are essentially, like, you're probably already used to using components if you've used React, Vue, Angular, Svelte, Stencil. The idea is basically taking chunks of your UI and making them these sort of ploppable chunks, usually wrapped up in some sort of HTML tag. But technically, nowadays, the native sort of browser API actually has the functionality for you to create your own web components without having to go through a framework like React, Angular, Vue. That's actually technically how Stencil works. Stencil, when you use Stencil from Ionic and you compile your components, which are actually made in a sort of React Angular type way, it's a cool framework. What you're doing is you're actually creating a web component. So what it does, it just takes your JSX and renders down a web component. What we're going to do is we're going to see how that works under the hood by actually creating a web component from scratch, not even using Stencil to make the web component. So basically, essentially, what I'm getting at is when you use Stencil, you compile your component, it's going to do exactly what we're doing right now. And the cool thing about this is that it's framework agnostic. So that means you could use these in a React project, you can use them in a Angular project, you can use them in your Vue project. You just would import them like you would import any other JavaScript. So let's see here. Let's create a new folder, and we'll call this we'll call this web component. And then what we do is we're going to create a new file, new index.html, and a new app.js. We will put in our HTML boilerplate. Okay, then we're going to put in the script tag. And that script tag will link to our app.js. Cool. And that's good. So we'll come back to this file. First, we actually have to create our web component. And to create like a full web component, you're really mixing three features that are part of the browser that you could use independent of each other. HTMLElement, which allows you to define classes that can then be brought into your code as an HTML element. Templates, which allow you to kind of create like chunks of predefined HTML that you can then plop and append. And three, the shadow DOM, where basically what it does, it creates, instead of your basically the parts of your component being part of the normal DOM, which means it's subject to all the global CSS variables and styles, it creates like a little mini DOM that's separate from everything else. So the CSS in that mini shadow DOM doesn't affect the global DOM, and then the global DOM styles don't affect the shadow DOM. Okay, so we're going to kind of take those three things together and make a web component. So in this video, we're going to make a web component. Probably in future videos, we'll take those three pieces and kind of show them separately. But okay, first step we're going to do is actually first define our element. Okay, so what we're going to do, and this is going to be using the feature HTMLElement. Okay, so let's see here. The way this works is we're going to create a new class. So it'll be class, we'll call this my component extends HTMLElement. So HTMLElement is the sort of base class that has all this already defined inside of it. And then we're going to define our constructor. Okay. Define our constructor. We're going to use super so that we invoke sort of the constructor of the parent object. And then here, we can do stuff. We can like define elements and stuff like that. Right now, I'm not going to define anything quite yet. I mean, technically, what we can do even before we do shadow DOM and template, I could actually just do this. This dot inner HTML equals, because technically this is a DOM element, so I can invoke normal DOM properties. So this dot inner HTML equals, I'll just use some backticks and we'll just say h1 hello world. Okay. Neat. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to do window dot define element. Let me just take a look at the example one I did earlier. All the way down here. Window custom element dot define. That's. Let me just copy that over. Okay. Spoiler is. So basically, what we're doing is we're actually telling the window, meaning the browser, that we're going to have a custom element that you can put in your HTML. We have to define it. So we're going to say that the element tag is Merced title. You generally have to put a dash for custom elements. It's just to prevent collisions with existing elements. So in this case, we're going to call it my component. So it's going to be my dash component. And then we have to refer to the class that we created that defines the component, my component. So it's saying, hey, whenever I invoke this tag in my HTML, we're going to refer to this class here in my JavaScript. Okay? And then once it's going to basically initiate this class, stick it into the DOM, and then technically we're saying that, hey, the HTML that shows up in there is this h1 hello world. Okay, so save. I go back to my index.html. And then I'll create an HTML tag, my dash component slash save. Okay, and now let's take a look at our HTML. So we actually have to load this in the browser. So show in file manager. Let's open this up in Chrome. Okay, it's currently not showing up, so let's explore. Okay, so this this dot inner HTML equals h1 hello world. That should be fine. Window dot custom element. And that should be custom element. No, it's custom elements dot define my component. The constructor. That all looks good. Let's go back to my HTML. My component. Let me see that I spelled that the same way. My component. Yes. So here's what I'm going to do. First, let's just put an h1 here just to make sure that there are files working. Hello world. Actually, we'll make this a p tag because we can see there should be a difference in size from what gets rendered. Save. Let's refresh. So there's the hello world p tag, so that's fine. Then let's test our JavaScript. I'm going to add a console log at the top. Oh, this is the wrong file. Here we go. Let me add a console log to the top. This one. Console.log. Hello. If you hear chirping in the background, I do have a cocktail. Save. Let's refresh that. Let's do our inspector. Go to our console. Hello. Cool. Okay, failed to construct custom element. The result must not have children. Okie dokie. Well, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna actually stick that instead. There is actually another like other built-in function called connected callback. This is kind of like the onload lifecycle function. Basically, it's done when the particular element loads. So I'm just gonna put this there instead. I think that might possibly fix the problem. Save. Okay, and let me just go back and take a look here. My component, yeah, it doesn't have any child components. So save. Refresh. Okay, now it shows up. Cool. So that was the issue. Okay, so basically the reason why that was giving me a problem before is because I had to define here, which means there was a chance that it hadn't actually gotten appended to the DOM yet. So by putting it in connected callback, you know it's been actually the elements attached to the DOM, so now I can actually change its DOM properties. So now you see it. Okay. Oh wait, that's the wrong file. Here, connected callback, hello world. Neat. Okay, so and then there's also disconnected callback, which just does the opposite. Whenever you disconnect or get rid of the DOM element from the DOM, it'll then just do whatever you want it to do. Okay, cool. So that's the HTML element piece. Okay, so we haven't done template yet. We haven't done the shadow DOM yet. Cool. Now the thing is that by doing it this way, I can just sit there and put all my HTML here, but then it becomes part of my normal DOM, which means any global styles will affect this particular component and other things. So what if I want to isolate it? I want to really just encapsulate this so that way, no matter what you're doing in your CSS for your project, it doesn't affect my component. My component is completely independent, and you can just plop it in any project that you want. So what we're going to want to do is set up a shadow DOM. Okay, in the shadow DOM, what we're going to do, okay, let's go back over here and I'll just first copy these first two pieces here. This is what creates the shadow DOM. Okay, we're going to do this dot attach shadow. So this what it does it says, hey, we're going to create a little mini DOM for this thing, for this DOM element. Okay, and this dot attach shadow says mode open, which just means you can, this just triggers it so that way you can actually see it in your console. So we'll see it in a second. And then this dot shadowRoot, the shadowRoot represents your new DOM. So before, when you would like work with the DOM, you would do like document dot query selector, document dot this, document dot that. But the document represents the normal document object model, the DOM that you've grown to know, love, and hate. Instead, you're going to have your own little mini DOM referred to as your shadow DOM. So that's what your shadowRoot's referring to. It's referring to your shadow DOM. And you can refer to anything in your shadow DOM. Okay, but you actually need to have stuff in your shadow DOM. So what we're going to do is we're going to append a template. You could just actually append different HTML elements from here if you want to, because again, your shadowRoot is just essentially your, think of it as like a separate, its own sort of DOM body tag. Okay, so we're going to come back to this. Okay, but first we actually have to define a template. But first, let's just do this. Cut this, and I'm going to put it down here because we're going to need it later. Okay, and instead what we're going to do is we're going to append an H1. So we're going to do what's the create element? Was the document create element again? Yep. Okay. shadowRoot, but in this case we want to create it on the shadowRoot. Dot create element. Let's see if this works. Create element, and we want to create an H1. Okay. Append child, create element dot H1, and then we're going to take that inner text of that, or I'll leave that there. And actually, I want all this over here. I want this in my constructor because I want to make sure I attach the shadow DOM when I construct this thing. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll just set that inner HTML down here. So I can just do this dot shadowRoot dot query selector, and then we're going to grab an H1. Okay, I'm going to get rid of this for the moment. So the goal is to get to the same place. This dot shadowRoot query selector H1 dot inner text equals hello world. Okay, so technically here we haven't introduced the template yet. So essentially all I'm doing is I have this little mini DOM, my shadowRoot, and I'm just going to create an H1 that I'm going to append to it. Okay. shadowRoot, and this should be actually this dot shadowRoot. There we go. And let's see if that works the way I think it should. Yep. Okay, this dot shadowRoot equivalent is not a function. Add my new component. Okay, and let's just take a look at our DOM here. Now if I go to my component, I see there's my component. There's an HP. So did I accidentally create the wrong tag here? H1, no, that's an H1. Okay. with hello world. Okay, so it just generated a, let's put in the h1 there. Not sure what this HP tag is. That's interesting. I guess because I couldn't find an h1. So let's see here. Let's try this again, but doing document. Document dot create element. So maybe shadowRoot doesn't get all the same functions as document does. Okay, so let's hit save. Let's refresh. There, that worked. Okay, so basically what we did, now we go back to our HTML again. So here's my shadowRoot. Again, my shadowRoot shows the thing that's defined in my shadow DOM. So notice there's that h1 that we append in hello world. Okay. So let's take a look over here. Do I still have that other hello world here? Yeah, I do. That's why. Oh, there's where the HP is. Okay. Let's get rid of that. Okay. So now we see, and that's what, again, that's what we mean by shadow DOM. You get this like little extra DOM, and any styles I have here won't affect this, and vice versa. Okay, so it's like, technically it's like having a little mini DOM within your normal DOM, and they don't touch each other. But the thing is that this kind of sucks having to append all my everything I want to append to this. So when you want to do big blocks of like HTML and you want to have predefined, there is a tag for that called template. Okay, there's two ways I could do it. I could define the template here in my HTML. I could go over here and do like template and give it an ID. So ID ID, we're going to call it hello. Okay, and then we'll do slash template. Okay, and then here we're going to have an h1 that says hello everyone. Okay, now the thing about a template tag is that it won't show up. So even though I have all this code here, it won't show up in the DOM, but it is still accessible to me in my JavaScript. So let me save that. Okay, so that template's hanging around. Let's refresh. Okay, so you don't see it in the DOM. It doesn't render it. It's there, but you see you don't see it. Okay, it's not going to be a visible thing. Okay, but what I can do now is I can take that template and then pull it into my component, and that's where this code comes into play. Okay, so what I'll do is instead of doing shadowRoot and append this h1 here, I'm going to use this template feature. Okay, in this case, I don't have the template captured that way, so actually let me take that back out. Okay, I need to go grab the template. So we're going to do document dot get element by ID and we chose the ID was hello. So what that's going to do is going to go grab that template element from our DOM, append it to our shadowRoot. So that way it becomes part of our component, because our component has a shadow attached to it. So again, we attached the shadow, and now we're attaching stuff to that shadow. Save. So let's see if I refresh. Okay. Let's see here what happened there. So there's the template. Document fragment. Hello everyone. But we don't see it. I think we have to do the clone thing. Oh wait, that's right. We have to do like document.content. Then we have to put the dot content here, because the template itself doesn't show up. So what I have to do is only grab the content in the template. So I have to do dot content here. Okay, and then I have to do dot clone node, because I want to clone all the nodes that are in there, and do that true. So there we go. Save. Okay, because we want to copy all the stuff that's in that template. So now we should see it. Still not quite where I want it to be. Document fragment. See, again, it's still pending it, but still doing the template thing. Okay. Bum, 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 bum. Equals true. Get element by ID. Phone node. Let's see here. Let me just take a look at my HTML over here. H1 ID hello. Content. So let's see what happens if we just do the content real quick. Save. Still copying over that whole entire template. Okay, so I'm messing that up, but the idea is that generally you're not going to go define your templates in your HTML file. Usually this is not the way you're going to do it. You can do it, and you can define templates, and I can go attach them around in my DOM if I wanted to, but generally not what you're going to do. Okay, and on that note, let me just go back over here. Let's just go take a look at the template piece of the MDM documentation. Okay. Okay, so it should just be template.content. Okay. Which is what we did. Hello.content. It's appended because we see it here. But the reason it's invisible because it's still in the template tag. Oh well. Generally, the normal way you would do it is you actually define the template in your JavaScript. And you might be familiar if you're doing this with like Svelte, Vue, where you generally have like a template section of your file. So essentially, the way you would do this is you just do document. Actually, first we need to put it in a variable. So const my template equals document dot create element. Okay, create element. And then we're going to create a template tag. So there we create the template tag, and then we do my template dot inner HTML. Okay, and that's going to equal, then just use some backticks and you can just do all your code here. So here I can just do h1 hello everyone /h1. Okay, cool. Now I have that. Hello everyone. There's our template so far. Okay, now I can then, where did that stuff go? Over here, now I can use this, which is essentially the same thing we have over here anyways. So I just replace this with this, except now that the template, the variable we have the template stored into, is called my template. So we're taking my template, which is a template tag, we're grabbing the content from the template and cloning it into our shadow node. Save. Okay, still not very happy with what I'm doing here. I think I'm missing a parenthesis. So I think that goes over here. Save. Much better. Okay, so that's saved. Now if we refresh this, and there you go, hello world. Okay, because we're attached from our template. Okay, now why wasn't it grabbing the other template right? I don't know, but when you define it in JavaScript, it works just fine. And the cool thing is that I can go attach this template to other things. So basically, again, these are reusable pieces. These are three separate things. The shadow that I attach to my HTML element, so this HTML element thing is what allows me to have the ability to use this tag right here, okay, the my component tag. It's the template that allows me to define sort of the HTML ahead of time. So it creates a sort of template of HTML, and then it's a shadow, this attached shadow and the shadowRoot piece that kind of allows me to have that shadow DOM that separates the HTML for this element, for this particular component, from the rest of the DOM. Okay, so you have these three things all kind of working in conjunction. You can use each of these pieces separately. Okay, you can go attach a shadow DOM to a div if you want. You could create, again, we did a custom element in the beginning and we didn't use a template or a shadow DOM in the beginning. You could create a template and just attach it to random parts of your HTML. So that way you can just copy the same template over and over again. You can do all those things separately, but when you use them together, you have this nice encapsulated sort of React-y, Angular-y type workflow. Okay, cool. So hello everyone. There's still more to learn. Okay, let's see here. So let's say I want to say here we have an H1, and then here we're going to have a P tag that's empty. Okay, and we're going to want some text in that P tag. Okay. Now you're going to want to, if you want to make any changes to the template, you want to do it after it's been attached to the DOM. So you're going to want to do it in this connected callback piece. So in this case, I want to do it query selector p dot inner text, and what we're going to do is we're going to actually use a prop. So if you might be familiar with in React, we have props, and you can pass some properties and use them. You can do the same thing here, except they're just normal HTML attributes. And the way you get any attribute is by basically saying, basically this dot inner text equals this dot get attribute. So we're going to get an attribute from this element, and we'll just say the name of this element will be text, which we have to go define. So this dot get attribute text. So let me go back to my HTML. We need to actually add a text attribute to, well, we don't need this template anymore. Okay, we'll just go over here and define a property called text and say, hey, look, I'm kind of like props. Okay, save. Okay, this I get attribute text. So technically the way this should work is that now the inner text of this P tag from our shadow DOM, because again we're using our shadowRoot to grab the P in our little mini DOM here that we've defined our template, and then putting this text in there. So let's see here. Hey, look, I'm kind of like props. Okay, and the cool thing is I can go copy this, now that this component's been defined, I can go copy this component over again, do this, change what it says. This time I'm different. Save. Okay, and go poop. Except that didn't quite work the way that I save it. Did save it. My component text. Hey, this looks. Hey, look. This time I'm different. So we should be seeing this component twice now. So let's save. Did I forget anything? No, I did not. So let's refresh. Oh, it's inside my component. That accidentally... Okay, I think I know what it wants. It doesn't like me self-closing it. It wants me to do this. Slash my component. Slash my component. Save. Okay, so that way it's very clear that one tag ends where. And there you go. So you see, I can, and literally just copies the same thing over again. So if you're familiar with React and creating components and just using them over and over again to make life really easy, well, here you go. Okay, so hey everyone, hey look, I'm kind of like props. Hello everyone, hey look, this time I'm different. And I can just do that over and over again, and I don't have to redefine all that HTML, all that syntax that I just did. But the great thing is I didn't have to bring in a whole library like React or Angular and increase my bundle size. So I can just basically define all my components here through standard web components and end up creating a much more leaner and slick website, because technically I'm only bringing in what I need to bring in. I'm only using standard browser API, so I don't have to load all this library into my user's computer. Okay, so this provides a huge speed benefit to your front end user when they're doing that initial load. Okay, cool. So a couple more things to learn. Okay, there's something called slots. Okay, so when you're defining your template, you can use a tag called slots, which defines places where you can put stuff. So let's define a slot. I'll define 2 slots. We'll do 1 slot here. So slot, this is going to be called top. Okay. And then we'll do another slot down here. Slot name equals bottom. And what these slots do is they allow you to create children, and then you can define where those children go. So save. So now if I were to do this, H2, then I give it a slot property. Slot, this will be in the top. This is a subtitle. This will end up being slotted above, but let me go give it another one. So let's do an H4. But except this H4 is going to have a slot, and it's going to be using the bottom slot. Actually, let's have even more fun. Let's make this in the bottom slot. So even though I wrote this first, it'll show up in that bottom slot, and this will show up in the top slot. Look, Ma, I'm on top. Okay, look, Ma, I'm on top. Neat. Okay, cool. So now I have that. Now let's see here. Let me go back and refresh. Look, Ma, I'm on top. Okay. Now let's go take a look at my DOM here. What exactly happened here? Slot. Okay, I think it wants me to go back, and it just doesn't like me self-closing tags. I think that's the issue. So I need to do this. And I didn't self-close the bottom one, so that's also not good. Slot. Slot. That's, I think, what I think it wants. Save. Cool. So you see here, even though I defined this as a subtitle, was actually defined first in my HTML, it shows up down here because it goes where the right slot is. Because I said, hey, put it in the bottom slot. This one put in the top slot. So this allows you to actually be able to like define things to be put into your component, like let's say an image for an avatar or all sorts of different cool stuff. So that way, there's just other ways to stick stuff inside there. You might be familiar with this in React, where you can use the children property or pass in other components as props. It's the same idea. But again, you don't have to have a framework for it. It's just built into the normal standard browser API. And essentially anything you can do in JavaScript, you can kind of play around with here, but you have all these tools. So the recap, you know, you can define your template. Your template, you can define slots. So with your template, you have slots to play with. Okay, and then slots would apply to whatever the template's part of. So again, if you append the content of a template somewhere else, you could then take advantage of those slots. It doesn't have to be as part of a component. And then you could also take advantage of like props by using just your standard get attribute function to grab the value of different attributes and then use them however you want in your code. Okay, you can literally do whatever you want and use those properties however you want. So then you're not necessarily locked into sort of the rules of JSX or the rules of Angular. Basically, whatever you can imagine JavaScript-wise is possible. Because you're just using standard JavaScript code. You're not having to deal with any kind of framework. You're only limited by your imagination. You're not locked into any framework. It is very, very cool. Okay, and it's the future in the sense that, you know, moving over to standard native web components is going to make dev teams more modular. They're not going to be as dependent on someone having to keep up with a particular framework. They'll be more reusable. It's going to be a while because there's so many people trained in doing React, Angular, and there's so many companies that already have that inertia. They have the marketing muscle. So again, those things are going to be around for a while. I think Svelte and Stencil will have their moment in the sun. Stencil even more so because it actually renders web components like this. So it actually does this. But it gives you the React kind of like React / Angular workflow with a mix of like TypeScript and React into one thing, but generates these web standard components. So that way you don't have to, you know, get too out of your comfort zone. But this is not so bad. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. You know, wasn't my suavest video, but I think you guys learned a few cool new tricks. And my name is Alex Merced from alexmercedcoder.com. Have a great day and enjoy.